Oh man, you guys, you are going to love this episode because there's going to be a lot of conversation sparked, thoughts, and everything about this subject. We're excited for you guys to join in.
All right, so today we're going to dive in and discuss some answers that we got from a post I made on my Facebook profile that said this: name some things that make marriage difficult. Like loaded gun kind of, but honestly, we were super impressed by the answers that we got, the thoughts behind them, and I really appreciated people staying pretty respectful in their answers versus using it as a way to just vent and gripe about their spouse, which could have definitely happened. But we did find some common themes, so we're going to talk about those a little bit today. And there's so many things that we could have went into, but again, like maybe one chunk at a time. So some common topics.
So the top issue causing area that we found was communication. Big surprise, right?
Yeah, like if only there was a translator for marriage, I'd pay big money for that. A little thing that could just gender translate over to you or vice versa.
Tim Hawkins wanted a GPS for marriage, if you remember.
Yes, I do remember that.
So communication involves how you process things and how long you take to do that, how maybe you express the emotions you have about it, how you listen, because listening is the other half of communication that people forget. We don't like that part as much. How you maybe respond, whether it's with your voice or how you act or facial expressions, how you express your needs and what you want. How you express your disappointments in what's going on, or even maybe what they're saying to you, how much you share about what's going on in your life currently, but also how much you share about what has already happened in your past and maybe is like baggage that you have and your spouse doesn't have a clue about it. But it seriously seems to be communication is kind of like woven into every issue that we have in marriage.
Yeah, and we saw that. I mean, I think everyone kind of knows that a little bit, but we really saw that when we went through the list of what the comments were on that post. So listen to this list and then just keep in mind how communication could be involved or like be a factor in these. So one of them was priorities. A couple examples were time spent together as a couple or family. So one person said putting the family that you made first versus the family that you came from. And I thought that was interesting.
That's good.
Yeah, because that kind of brings up like the leave and cleave and cutting the umbilical cord from the parents, because we've seen that a little bit, or we've seen that in ourselves or in other families where that's an issue. So we'll just leave it at that. Priorities, and specifically talking about priorities with your own family, but also like obviously parenting and kids, right? So parenting styles, punishment. One person brought up stepchildren and the step role, and that's something we can't speak of personally, but we have close friends and family that we have talked about. You know, they've shared with us that's really hard. Love languages was another example. Super good. That's a whole nother episode too, because I love that. Baggage from your past, that's known or unknown, like that's huge, because that there's can be triggers from stuff in the past and trauma. And if it's not all out there and you don't share it together, don't communicate that, right? Then you just don't know.
And it will come up.
And it will come up. And if it doesn't come up, it's festering, right? It's festering underneath, and it's causing this wall and this tension that like you don't know why. The other person doesn't know why. So another thing. So a couple other things: in-laws, unmet expectations, the grass is not greener on the other side, trying to fix the other spouse, and none of us try that, right? We don't try to fix or change the other one. Intimacy issues, finances, another huge area. Like all of these are just huge areas. So these are all things that we will be talking about eventually, but we're talking right now just about the communication piece. So finances, household responsibilities, not having like-minded goals or being on the same page with things. And then another one was unequal workload or mental workload, and the differences of that. So, I mean, all of these issues could ultimately start with communicating them and your thoughts and needs behind them.
It's also really important to understand that your spouse doesn't know what they don't know. So starting with that conversation and waiting for a good time when you're not angry about something to start that, because we all know how that works. Like when you're mad, you want to get in that one shot that's going to just burn them. And then you want to mic drop and walk away. But that's not what happens. It's all guns are out and they're blazing. And we're bringing up stuff from only the Lord knows when that happened. And probably one of them doesn't even remember it happening. So that's really important to think about. When you're angry is not the time to try to improve things. So a good verse for that is Proverbs 15:1, which says, "A gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger." So that's where the gunfight comes in.
I'm going to totally fess up that he's waiting for it. He's just like, yes, Sarah, say it. I know what's coming, but I am like definitely the worst one about wanting to get my point in and then just, be done, walk away. And I'm not really good about waiting, letting things soak in. So I'm trying to be better about that.
I just didn't know that about you.
Yeah. This is somebody journal about this, or he's going to put it in he doesn't journal, so he can't, but let it be known on this day that Sarah said that. Okay. But I want to bring up though, too, like the question of, can you over communicate things though? And I mean, yes, that's a definite yes. There's some things from your past like that they need to know about, but you don't have to go into every gory detail of it. Not, you know what I mean? But also over communicating things is called nagging. Okay. Like, so when you're trying to wait for every single time it comes up again, that you're reminding them of it, right? And you keep trying to work on it, but you're doing it so like incessantly, like it's going to drive them nuts. And if it was me, and maybe you too, it's going to make me just want to push against it even more, because it's like, you just don't want it in that light. And it's the way that we say it, right? It's just like, I told you, right? That voice, like, this is exactly what we've been talking about. This is what I told you about. This is what I said last week. And, and so that's a huge thing where we can over communicate it. So every single time we see, it's like we're waiting for that little stumble. And then we're like, see, you just did that. So over communicating is nagging, and there's got to be a balance between that.
And if I can interject here, I just thought of this, but this is something I'm probably guilty of more than her, is that I'll just keep bringing it up and keep talking about it until I get the result that I feel like is the one that I want. Like, yes, we took care of it now. And all the time she's going, we've talked about this 20 times. Why are you bringing this up? So that's on me. That's probably what I do. Kind of overthinking maybe a little bit. I don't do that, do I?
Sometimes, but it's not a bad thing necessarily. I'm glad that he's actually thinking about it, right? But it's not just like whatever.
Sometimes too, we need to remember that it comes down to perception versus reality in our marriages, because what you perceive is usually one-sided, even though like that's what you feel. So that's real to you, but it may not be what is actually the truth. And even though that is your reality, it can be something that you can buffer. And if you're aware of it, you can use some emotional intelligence and like some thought to kind of try to correct that before you lash out.
Right. Like, for example, I could say that Nathan doesn't listen well to me at all because I say things and he's not looking at me. He doesn't always nod or respond to what I'm saying, and he doesn't answer right away when I ask him something. Okay, those are all true, but that seriously doesn't mean that that's reality, that Nathan doesn't listen well to me. That's like the reality that sometimes I've thought, but it's just because he has a different way of communicating than me. And if I can be aware of that and give him the benefit of the doubt and not always think poorly of the way his communication style is, it's just different. It's different than me. And so if I'm aware of that, then I'm not going to get super ticked off when he isn't listening to me. But I also have communicated to him, honey, I need you to I need some form of nonverbal or verbal or something so I know that you even heard me, or I'm not talking to myself, right?
And on the flip side of that, I also tell her things, and then later on I'm like, I told you this, you should already know it. And she's like, honey, was I looking at you? Because if I wasn't looking at you, I probably wasn't listening. And I'm like,
or I say, did I respond? I say that more. I'm like, did I respond?
Because I need to realize that just because I don't respond necessarily, doesn't mean that that's the way she is, because she usually always will respond if she's listening to what I say.
And I don't hear it. But yeah, I have to do better about just maybe looking and listening, because you guys, that is really important. Giving that person like your time of day with your full attention, looking at them, putting your phone down, not this like, right? Like we do that a lot. And I'm guilty. But all of this to say that the communication piece and the issues with it, like it can get better. It does get better. It can get better with discussion and time and figuring each other out and trying to kind of meet in the middle. Because I mean, obviously apples and oranges, like we can't become each other, and we just have to realize like they're never going to communicate the way that I do. And,
or the way that you want them to, like,
right.
So,
but yeah.
And let's see, probably the second top area that we found in this was personalities.
If you haven't noticed.
And we could go on for days about our personalities, but it affects how you act, whether it's you act this way in public and this way in private, or just you act this way in this situation or that way in that situation. And we'll definitely be going deeper into this in another episode later on, but it has so much to do with how we communicate. And it seems to be linked to the top issue because personality and communication are pretty closely tied. Mm-hmm. It also kind of tells us what our priorities are and our interests, our parenting styles, love language, all of that is tied to our personalities and how we express ourselves emotionally, spiritually, or whatever. Mm-hmm. Also, if your personalities are too much alike, yikes.
Yeah, like there is going to come an episode on personalities because it is such a huge thing. But we really found like what really annoyed us about each other was honestly where we needed to fill in the gaps for each other, because my weakness is one thing, but that's his strength and vice versa. And if you're too much alike and you both are like, let's get it done, or you're both like just real timid, and yeah, I struggle with that so much, but but like if your personalities are too much alike, you're going to butt heads a lot. So when you're married, obviously it's like you can't really change that now, knowing that maybe picking somebody that had a different personality or a complementary personality. But seriously, when I hear people say, it just happened like a month ago, somebody's like, oh, my son or daughter, they were getting married, they're going to be getting married. And she's like, and they're like exactly the same. They're so much alike. And she was all excited. And I was thinking, oh crap, that's not going to be very good, because it's like cringe factor, because it may seem cute at first, super cute that you're both competitive and you both blah, blah, blah. But honestly, I foresee problems in the future, because it's going to be competing against each other, and your strengths are going to be butting up and your weaknesses are going to be more pronounced if you both have the same weaknesses.
And we don't obviously have that in our marriage because we're not the same, but we can see it in our own house because our daughter and our youngest son, boom, 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 all the time.
Yeah. So another huge issue, but not necessarily something that comes up every single day in the home, but it is huge. Is not being spiritually connected. So like if one person's seeking Jesus and the other one isn't, or even differences in like religions that they choose, like we've seen where they're both seeking Jesus, or they
think they are
in their own way, but it's just like such a wall there. So some examples, you want to share some examples?
Yeah, like, so if maybe one of the marriage is going to church and maybe taking the kids, but the other one's just staying home, it's really hard to be on the same page when, like, here we have this church family and we're trying to be a part of it, and then this one is on the outside and not involved in that at all. And that kind of pours into like what standards you're going to try to uphold in your home too. Like, yeah, just the same page. I mean, this person's trying to instill these truths and this into their kids and into their behavior and in their home overall, but this one is like, no, that's not even important. That's going to be a big rift.
Yeah, because like not only in your marriage is that going to, have we seen, and we've seen it in ourselves too, because he grew up like even more conservative and strict than I did, a little bit.
Yeah. Maybe in some ways,
yeah. Because he had to wear jogging pants
for basketball
because even guys couldn't show their legs for some reason. So we won't go into that. But like, I'm telling you, like there's some things where like super, super, super conservative, very conservative, like even that was different. But if you guys think about it, I mean, when your home is kind of divided and you've got completely like not even thinking about like the spiritual health of your home, and if you are gonna cuss in front of your kids or get drunk or let your kids do that stuff or whatever, like it's just going to be a huge rift in between.
And just quickly, another one, obvious one that we haven't touched on yet, is if one person is completely not saved, like they're not a Christian and one is a Christian. So that's obviously going to be a very, very tough situation, but it's not something you can just bail out of either. You just have to do your best with what you have and try to do what you can to lead that person to Christ, because we know that's the answer ultimately. 1 Peter 3:1 says, "Wives, in the same way, submit yourselves to your own husbands, so that if any of them do not believe the word, they may be won over without words by the behavior of their wives, when they see the purity and reverence of your lives." And obviously that can be the flip too. Like if the husband is saved and not the wife, then he can, by his example and by his love and respect, lead his wife to the Lord, which would be our ultimate goal in that situation.
Right. So again, like ladies, submit to your husbands. I know that's a whole conversation that we could have, but in this way, they're saying basically don't leave the marriage. Don't leave the marriage if they aren't believing. Like, be the example. You trust God. You just keep going in faith and doing your thing. And, you know, we can hope that they follow, but we have to remember something. So, like, our timing is not God's timing. So when we want things to change and we want these areas to get better, we have to figure out, like, things can go on for years. And we had issues that went on for years between the two of us that we were either left completely unsaid, or maybe they were talked about, but we didn't really take major action together to change it. It was like, well, yeah, it's a problem. But again, like, but we can't talk to anybody about it because we don't want people to know, or we can't, you know, there's things that's just like, it needs to be talked about. It needs to be communicated together in love when you're not angry and things like that. But finding people who can support you and have your best interest in mind would be great, that you can talk with them about it either separately and or together and things like that. But if that person, we're going to say this, if your spouse is not receptive to what you're talking to them about or telling them or asking them and sharing with them, like, you can communicate all you want, right? But if they're not receptive, that's a whole different ballgame. Because this was all like, hey, just talk about it, it'll be okay. But that doesn't mean it's always going to be okay. We all know that. And so there's, another episode and topic is what if it's a one-sided deal? Like, what if only one person is trying? What do you do with that? So that's another episode. But again, like, realize God's timing is not ours, and it might take a while. And the second thing is also, the first place to start, if there's things that need to change, is looking at yourself. Like, what are ways that you are contributing to the problem?
Even if you feel like the other person is the major problem, right, there's always stuff that starts right here. And
right. Like, how am I contributing? What things can I do to help it? Like, what areas in my life could I strengthen that could impact things? Maybe there's areas in my life, like, I need to grow spiritually, or like, seriously, guys, like, changing jobs. You can go as like disrupting the pattern. And this is what we're talking about. Disrupting means like a major change. It's not just like buffing it and it's good. Like, disrupting is if there's a major problem and your marriage is about to end, there has to be some major changes. So that could be like, if your job is causing major stress and is so oppressive that your spouse isn't themselves anymore, get a different job. I don't even care what it takes. Like, if that's going to save your marriage and family, then do it. Changing friendships that are toxic, leave them. Are they more important than your marriage and family?
Right.
Not, I'm sure they're not. They're just it's a no, right?
Yeah.
Or even if it is going to church, even if it's alone, keep going. Like, you can only change yourself. And so sometimes you just like start with looking at what you can do and get humble, eat your humble pie, because it takes two for things to be going wrong, right?
And even if you're going to church alone, hopefully that's going to be the best place to find that support from other people to help you through that time. I mean,
right.
We would like to think church would be the best place to get
right.
there.
So we're going to end this today, but I want to say one more thing. We have something that we want to give you that may help start the conversation and identify some areas that you can work on. So check the description of this episode or in the comments, depending on if you're watching on YouTube or you're listening on podcast. We do have it available on both sides. So I'm going to put a link there, and the link is to our free family systems check guide to help you out a little bit. So it has questions and some thoughts, and share some ways that we work through things together that could maybe be a way to ignite some change in your marriage and family as well. So go and check that. But we want to just thank you so much for listening.
Yes, thank you.
We would love you guys if you would subscribe and leave an honest review for us. And bonus, even if you want to take a screenshot of you listening or watching the episode, tag us in your story on socials to spread the word. We would be super excited about that, because your support is what's going to keep this going and grow its reach to more and more people. And so we would really love your support. But thanks for hanging with us, and we will see you on the next episode, guys.
Bye.
Bye.